Okay. We're ready to start now. Good evening, everyone. I know others will be joining, and a lot more will be joining, Tiffany, so your audience will increase as the time goes by. Good evening, everyone, to my fellow PMI members, UAE chapter members, and our PMI colleagues from all over the globe. Thank you for joining us today. We have a very interesting webinar today entitled Empowering the People We Lead to Feel More Valued and Fulfilled at Work, by Tiffany Chang. And I took one of her titles in her website, which is Conductor as a CEO. Just a little brief about the PMI, which we normally do. PMI, as you know, is a world leader working on our behalf of project managers to enhance and advance the project management profession worldwide. PMI UAE Chapter is the country's chapter of the US-based PMI Institute, run by 100% volunteers. So most of us here working to present this webinar are all volunteers, everyone behind this. We are proud to be the top 5 chapters globally in terms of members. And we also encourage anyone here joining who are not yet PMI members to please grab the opportunity. We have a limited offer of $20 annual fee if you join until end of September. So you will also get a lot of benefits that we enjoy. We are passionate about project management, professional and personal development, networking, and education. So we are depending on you, our chapter members, and we want you to be please interactive and participate as much as possible. So in this way, you are also contributing in these interesting talks. You can also participate as speaker or contribute some presentations and do the Q&A later. Help us out and be part of the volunteering group. We have a lot of volunteer available. Just visit our PMI UAE LinkedIn page. This is a brief overview of our PMI UAE chapter board. It's for you to know who are our leaders, who are all supportive and planning for the success of every activities and events of PMI UAE chapter. These are the 4 pillars of the benefits of a PMI UAE chapter member. We have the networking, learning and knowledge sharing, career growth and events. We have these diversified webinars, one of which is you are attending today. We thank our collaborators and partners who are giving us sponsorship and giving us speakers as well as we need in every possible opportunity like the events and webinars. For this particular webinar, you will getting 2 strategic PDU, and please note, engage with the panelists later after the webinar talk. I will read your questions through the Q&A, please, instead of the chat, because your questions might be covered by the other chats. So I would appreciate if you can put your questions in the Q&A. Also, please note, to finish the webinar so that you can achieve the 2 strategic PDUs. It will be added into your account within 4 weeks, and if you don't receive it, please email info@pmiuae.org. For more information, you can follow our social media in Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. So to introduce our esteemed speaker, I'm very honored to introduce you, Tiffany. Tiffany Chang is an award-winning orchestra and opera conductor who has been recognized internationally by the Solti Foundation US, the American Prize, Opera America, and the LIT Talent Awards. She has served as a professor at Oberlin's Conservatory, Baldwin Wallace, and the Berklee College of Music. She authors a leadership blog called Conductor as a CEO, where she shares how arts leaders may apply ideas which have helped business CEOs succeed. Her refreshing and thoughtful leadership on and off the stage has led her to be an active panelist, a speaker, and contributor for organizations such as the Canton Symphony, Girls Who Conduct, Sound Mind, Notes from the Podium, and PM World Journal. My dear fellow PMI UAE chapter colleagues, if we as project managers visualize the flow of our project activities through the Gantt chart, under Tiffany's deft baton, a 40-piece orchestra played with impressive unity, focus, exceptional clarity, and finesse. She will teach us how to see the world differently through the other's eyes and to explore the relevance of other fields not same as ours. So without any further ado, our PMI members and guests, please welcome Tiffany Chang. The floor is yours, Tiffany.
Thank you so much, Irene, and thank you everyone for being here. I'm so excited to be engaging with you today. And I'm gonna just take a moment to share my screen. We tested this before, so hopefully it will all work out. Great, awesome. I think this works. And great, okay. So I think this works. Let me get this out of the way. All right. So great to see all of you here. And so great to see Yasmina here in the in this webinar. I learned from Yasmina that project managers, that in the project management world, that it's sort of cliche to compare a project manager to a conductor. And I had never known that until I had spoken to Yasmina. So I'm really excited to make that connection here today. I want to start by sharing that I recently left a job where I worked as a conductor for several years. And it took me about a year or so to feel really okay about my decision to leave. One of the reasons I left was because of my supervisor. He was the kind of manager who only interacted with me under two circumstances. One, when something was wrong, and two, when he needed something from me. So when I'd get an email from him, my heart would drop. I knew without a doubt that something was wrong. I did something he didn't like, or he needed a favor, and it was always an emergency. Otherwise, I would never have heard from him. And he never asked how I was doing. He never asked where I might need his support or what my career goals were. And over several years, I started to feel something was wrong. And I started to feel afraid of doing things wrong. I avoided risky projects or creative endeavors because I felt like there was just too much room for error. And in the back of my head, I was always asking, how would my supervisor think? What would he say? I also started to feel isolated and unsupported. As time passed, I felt less like I'm part of the department. I didn't feel like I belonged anymore. I didn't feel like I was welcome even. And I felt like I was just never good enough. Never good enough for my supervisor, never good enough for my institution. My self-worth went on a roller coaster ride, swinging wildly up and down, back and forth. And I felt stuck in my job and stuck in my career. And to be honest, the majority of the jobs that I've had were like this. I felt undervalued and underappreciated. I would lose touch quickly with why I was there in the first place. And I always wondered if there was something wrong with me, if it happened to me again and again and again. Why couldn't I just get over it? Why couldn't I motivate myself? Why couldn't I just be brave and try new things? Why wasn't I growing as an artist, as a professional? Why wasn't I moving forward in my career? And I wondered, was I really just not good enough? I didn't know that these feelings were the result of disempowerment. And then about a year ago, I was a guest conductor at an opera company that I've never worked at before. And there, I experienced the opposite of disempowerment, which is empowerment. And it was a brand new feeling for me, and I was surprised why I rarely felt this way before, especially in a profession where, you know, we feel like that we're on stage and we can do anything we want and we're in charge, where, you know, I, as the conductor, I'm in charge of everything. Why did I rarely feel empowered? So what did it feel like to feel empowered? I felt like at this gig that I was at, that the leadership really wanted me to do my best. I didn't feel like they were looking over my shoulder, trying to catch me making a mistake. I felt empowered to try something I wasn't sure would work. And I knew deep down that it was okay to make some mistakes in that process. I knew that it wasn't a one strike and you're out deal, because I saw that others' mistakes were received by support instead of punishment. And I felt empowered to have a voice, to speak up when I saw something that could be improved or was a problem, because I was allowed to take the initiative. And I felt empowered to simply be myself and put effort into the things that I really cared the most about. I didn't feel like I had to be somebody else. I was allowed to lean into my values and to honor those values. And most surprisingly, I did my best artistic work without really even trying to do so. I wasn't constantly worrying about whether I was achieving or whether I was good enough for this opera company. And it was interesting because as I reflect on it, I don't think that in that time, I miraculously became a much better conductor. I didn't increase my skills that much. I didn't really change who I was, my working style, or I didn't adjust my values. I was simply empowered. And wow, was I intrigued. I wondered, how do they do that? And I wanted more of that empowerment. If we think about it, the people we lead are humans just like us. And it's safe to say that they also want to feel empowered too. So as leaders, we have the privilege to serve them in that way. And that is exciting for me. So as humans, we thrive on feeling included. What we really want is belonging more than anything else. We want to belong to our families, to our communities, to our teams, and to our institutions. We don't want to be left out. We don't want to appear different. And we're constantly evaluating whether we are in or we're out. So our fear and defense mechanisms are actually triggered when our sense of belonging is threatened. And that this can be someone you look up to disagreeing with what you just said, someone saying that you're not good enough for their group, someone giving us a label or an identity that we never wanted in the first place. And we have a visceral fight or flight response. So we do everything we can to maintain our status and stay in our group. We sometimes conform. We may seek social approval. So we might say something we don't believe in or do something we don't really want to do. We may even feel shame. And when we feel shame, we try to adjust our behavior to maintain our sense of self-esteem, sometimes beyond who we really are. And sometimes that desire for belonging allows us to work harder, to impress other people, and to earn our place in a group. But that desire can also hold us back. We are afraid of what others might think of what we say. If we show who we really are, maybe people won't like us. If we make a mistake, maybe people will lose respect for us. And we might seem weak and no longer valuable to the team in that case. And we might be excluded from the group. People might stop inviting us to lunch. And if we get on our boss's bad side, we might lose a chance at a promotion. Or worse, we might be fired and asked to leave the group. So about a month ago, I was a guest conductor at a young artist opera program. There, I was working with college-aged and graduate school-aged young artists, singers, and pianists and instrumentalists. And I had an assistant conductor who was a graduate student studying conducting. And His job was to play the piano and help the singers learn their parts before I arrived as the guest artist. And I remember one rehearsal, I was conducting and my assistant was playing the piano. And the artistic director of the entire program, both of our bosses, walked into the room with a few sheets of music in her hands, walks up to my assistant and whispers something in his ear. And they have a quick conversation, and then she left. My assistant seemed a little bit distracted, but we kept going and the rehearsal kept going. And after the rehearsal, my assistant conductor shared that the artistic director came to tell him that some of the singers never learned those few pages of music. And it turned out that my assistant accidentally skipped those pages when he was coaching and preparing the singers. He shared that he was scared that he was going to be fired. Those were the first words that came out of his mouth. And it was half jokingly, but I could also hear the half seriousness part of it in his voice. And I started to notice this, oh, I'm so scared that I'm going to get fired, among many of the college age students who were there gaining experience, gaining professional experience in this young artist program. And I realized that there's a term for this, and it's psychological danger, where we fear negative consequences and we fear being excluded. And this drives a lot of our actions and thoughts. So let's check in a little bit with some biology. This fear gives us stress, and stress induces an increase in cortisol, which is adrenaline. And this cortisol blocks oxytocin, which is our feel-good chemical that triggers the feeling of belonging. So this is why when we don't feel psychologically safe, we don't get the feeling of belonging. And when we don't feel like we belong, we actually don't feel safe. Safety and belonging are mutually inclusive and they're symbiotic. It feels safer sometimes to fly under the radar, especially when we feel psychological danger. We stop ourselves from speaking up out of fear of retribution. We don't try things that might not work because we are conditioned to think that failure equals losing our status, losing our rank, and maybe losing our jobs. Gary Ridge, the CEO of WD-40, made an astute observation. He said that the only time the people know they're doing a good job is because nobody yelled at them today. And that really resonated with me because this is true in the music industry. We avoid showing our face, or we avoid standing out because of something that we did wrong. So we'd rather just not get the attention. But I don't think we want to just fly under the radar. We want to fly above the radar so we can be seen. We want to feel empowered to be our best selves. And we want to keep growing as people so we can do better work as part of our contribution. And we want to increase our value in that process. We also want to feel seen for who we are and be valued for who we are. We do not actually want to fit into a box or what somebody else wants us to be. We want to belong. And fitting in and belonging are two very different things. Brene Brown frames this nicely. She says that fitting in is changing who you are, and belonging is being allowed to be yourself. So to empower our people, we want to promote the opposite of psychological safety, I'll say it again. To empower our people, we want to promote the opposite of psychological danger, which is psychological safety. And this is where psychological safety is where we feel safe to take risks, to speak up, and to disclose our shortcomings. It creates a space where we are allowed to grow and iterate, to fail, to generate and test new ideas, a space where we are allowed to be ourselves and contribute our best work. So how do we do this? Today, I'd like to share with you 3 strategies that I've encountered along my journey that resonates with me. Number 1 is feeding belonging. Number 2 is putting the people first. And number 3 is focusing on purpose. And I'll go through them one at a time. First, feeding belonging. We need a lot of reminders that we belong. If you think about it, how many times do you need to hear, "I love you," from your significant other, your sister, your parents, your friends? How many times do you need to hear the words, "I love you"? Never enough times, not enough times. And this is one of the ideas that Daniel Coyle shares in his book, The Culture Code, where he also said that belonging is a flame that needs to be constantly fed. And we can capitalize on this understanding of what we need to empower our people. Coyle encourages leaders to signal belonging using a 3-part narrative. And here's how it goes. Number 1, you are part of this group. And number 2, this group is special. We have high standards here. And 3, I believe you can reach those standards. Together, this 3-part narrative sets the stage for a strong sense of belonging. And it seems to make perfect sense. However, I wonder, how often does it really happen? I don't think that we do it enough. Or in fact, sometimes we do the opposite. For example, in the performing arts, professional positions are so competitive. Just to give you an idea, for one violin spot in a major symphony orchestra, you can sometimes have over 300 applicants, and only one person maybe gets a job. The orchestra may reserve the right to take nobody and just continue to have a vacant position. So given the competition, musicians tend to hold the collective illusion that we should be grateful once an orchestra has given us a coveted job. Our default premise is, as an industry, is that the musician is lucky to be there, as opposed to the organization being lucky to have the musician. So for the musician, we lead ourselves to believe that we have to continue earning our place in the group, even after we've won the job. And in our minds, our standing in the group is constantly being jeopardized. We're constantly thinking about, are we going to get fired? And leaders don't help alleviate this worry enough because we don't signal belonging. Leaders often start with a skeptical mindset, especially in music, where they signal, we're not really sure if you can reach those standards. Prove to us that you can. And conductors sometimes are the culprits, the real culprits, because they come into the rehearsal room with the intention of having to do damage control or quality control. We're always thinking about what we need to fix. We're anticipating what we need to fix and what could go wrong. Who's going to be the problem? And sometimes the expectation is that people need 100% fixing and 0% encouraging. In other words, we kind of expect things to be bad. And so we end up signaling doubt instead of belonging, even if we don't mean it. There's a study that actually says for every piece of negative feedback, we need 3 to 5 pieces of positive feedback to counter the psychological effect of that one negative feedback. So it seems like we need to do a lot more encouraging to signal belonging. I want to share 5 ways we can better feed belonging. Number 1, believe they can. And it sounds so simple, but believe they can innately achieve the desired goals on their own, and remind them of this frequently. I remember a couple years ago, I chose a piece of music for my orchestra that was kind of hard and just out of their comfort zone. And I was talking about this piece to a colleague of mine who said to me, I'm not sure if your musicians are good enough to perform that piece. It's just way too hard for them. I don't think you should do it. I don't think they can do it. And this colleague has never come to any of my concerts to see my people in action, nor have they heard my musicians play in any other context. And the assumption is just that they can't do it. And I realized that if my colleague were leading my musicians in this piece, the orchestra's chance of failing would probably be pretty high. I, on the other hand, started with the belief that they can, and they were able to reach further in their growth. So I think that the mindset did make a difference. When you have a leader who believes in you, you feel like you can do anything, and you often surprise yourself in what you can actually accomplish. My belief in my musicians empowered them to believe in themselves, and they ended up performing the piece better than they thought that they would. Number 2, trust that they will figure it out. Be mindful of when to stop dictating and stop micromanaging. And this is really hard, especially I have trouble with this. Because we want to demonstrate that we want to demonstrate through trust that they are valuable as people as well, and we trust their specific expertise. If we're always watching behind their backs, that sends a signal that we don't think they can do it. The trust empowers people to take ownership of the process and gives them the confidence that they can achieve that goal. And we can't expect our people to trust us if we don't trust them first. Amy Cuddy, who is the one who gave the famous TED Talk about the power pose, said that when we give trust, we often get it back. So it's important to give trust first as a leader. Number 3, remove blame. Okay, so what if you give them the trust and you allow them to do it, and then they don't figure it out and they fail and it doesn't work? First, in how we respond, we can remove blame from the debrief conversations. Jim Collins, the author of Good to Great, calls these autopsies without blame. He advises us to focus on the facts, not the people, and to be curious rather than judging when we're uncovering the problems and trying to discover the solutions. To focus on future actions rather than the wrongs of the past, and to be a collaborator rather than a supervisor. Basically, we want to show that we are on their side when we have these conversations after a failure or a problem. And relatedly, number 4, we want to treat failure differently. Now, when we fail, we often just focus on the results of failure. We don't often look at the causes of that failure. And Amy Edmondson, the queen of psychological safety and Harvard Business School professor, shares that the causes for failure can fall into 2 categories. They can be praiseworthy or blameworthy. Praiseworthy causes for failures are things like experimentation and complexity, trying something a new way, making an adjustment for the first time. And blameworthy causes for failures are things like incompetence and inattention, so coming unprepared or negligent. Now, what's really interesting is to consider what percentage of failures are caused by blameworthy acts or blameworthy failures, and what percentage of failures are treated as blameworthy failures. The difference between those 2 percentages can be quite revealing. And this happens often in the music industry. We tend to overgeneralize mistakes. A mistake may be the result of a lack of preparation, which would be blameworthy, or it can be a result of trying something different for the first time, praiseworthy. Yet, when we see a mistake in performance, we often treat it both the same, regardless of whether it's because of a lack of preparation or because it was due to experimentation. And we respond to both kinds of failure with shame and punishment and potential exclusion. We don't do it on purpose. It's just simply a habit that we've developed over time, over our careers and over our lives. And I think that we can do better by responding to praiseworthy failures with positive reinforcement and additional support rather than punishment. And to be able to to distinguish that it is a praiseworthy failure rather than a blameworthy failure. As leaders, we can also model this in ourselves. We can lead by admitting when we don't know all the answers and that we are sometimes wrong. We can communicate that it is okay to be wrong and to make mistakes. This practice will really help us all feel safer in doing our work, and it will empower us to take the risks without the fear of exclusion. So the final and the fifth way to feed belonging is to use future orientation. Future orientation can be an appropriate response for a praiseworthy failure. It's something that signals that the relationship will continue. For example, I can tell a musician after maybe they've not played a great performance that I can tell them, when you join us again for the next concert, I look forward to hearing how your solo will have become more nuanced from this first iteration. It's important that they know that their areas of growth do not jeopardize their standing in the group. This allows them the room to grow. And this empowers the people to normalize learning and to think of their areas of growth as opportunities to be better, rather than defects to hide or threats to their belonging. Belonging empowers us to feel safe without having to play it safe. When we intentionally communicate and signal belonging, we allow people to recognize that they are valuable for who they are and what they bring, and they don't need to hide it. They start to believe they can achieve what we expect of them. And they begin to understand that failure does not automatically shun them from the group. It's normal to make mistakes. What's important is how they grow from those failures and knowing that we are here to support them rather than hold judgment. Now, once we help our people feel belonging, we can continue to put our people first. So let's take a moment to reflect. I'd like you to think of a time when you could have done more to empower the people you led. What comes to mind for me is when I have a challenging person on my team, I tend to avoid them at all costs. I walk the other way when I see them. I try to only engage with them via email, and I really could have instead reached out to understand what's really going on, but I usually don't. I'm just too scared. And I realize that. And now I want you to ask yourself, when you could have empowered but you didn't, why didn't you? It's likely that the answer is one of two things. Number one, it is all about you. Your feelings get in the way. It might have felt uncomfortable for you. You might have been scared of the consequences, and you might have concerns about how you might come across. Or the second reason is that your focus is elsewhere. It could be on the product, on the customer, on the bottom line, anywhere but the people in front of you who you lead. And this is especially true after the pandemic in the arts. I've noticed that so many organizations are talking about how to bring back audiences. We end up being so focused on being customer-centric. How do we incentivize ticket sales, donations, etc.? And at the same time, there is a study that surveyed job satisfaction rates of employees in various industries, including orchestra musicians. And it found that out of 13 professions, orchestra musicians fell in the last third. Their job satisfaction rates were below that of prison guards and flight attendants. So while surprising, this statistic holds some water. I think that in being so focused on the customer, arts organizations neglect a very important part of their organizations, the people who make the product, the musicians on stage. We care so much on the bottom line and marketing the product that our musicians actually feel undervalued, underappreciated, and disengaged. They feel like cogs because our organizations don't put them first. And we think that it's often an either or, but we can care for both the customer and the employees at the same time. So how do we put our people first? Here are 3 ways that I'd like to share with you. First is in order to start empowering, we must take a look at how we might be disempowering. Going into the coaching world, Michael Bunke-Stanier, the author of The Coaching Habit, says, your advice is not as good as you think it is. As leaders, we love giving advice. We love to fix things and to solve problems. It makes us feel great, valuable, helpful, and smart. Now I'd like to ask yourself, in a conversation with someone, how quickly do you want to give advice? Do you want to provide the answer? Did you know that the average time for interruption for doctors is 18 seconds? Have you ever been in a doctor's office where they just simply don't let you finish and they just interrupt you? I certainly had that happen to me. So when we jump in with advice, how do you think it makes the people we lead feel? Again, it's hard to remember that it is not all about us. Michael Bunke-Stanier calls these inclinations advice-giving monsters, and all of them disempower our people. The first one is we want to tell it. And when we tell it, we stop other people from contributing to a solution because we've told them the answer. We also want to save it. And when we save it, we automatically make our people victims. We also want to control it. And when we control it, we encourage people to disengage because they have no more stake in the game. Now, while we can't just stop giving advice altogether, we can delay the advice to give space to empower our people to step up and feel like they can provide value and contribute in the meantime. We can also ask questions instead of telling. Questions empower people to seek the most appropriate answers on their own. They also help us further understand more about our people, which brings me to my second point. Treat people how they would like to be treated. We all know the golden rule, treat others as we'd like to be treated. But are our needs the same as theirs? Do they want what we want? Do they think what we think? What I've learned is that you never know what people are really thinking. And we need to find out by actually asking them questions. And through what we learn directly from our people, we are equipped to empower through that understanding. I came across these fantastic questions to ask our people. And these questions come from Marcus Buckingham, who is an author. He suggests that we ask our people, tell us where you're at your best. Where do you want people to rely on you? Where do you feel really good when people turn to you for it? And tell us where you need help. We sometimes assume that we know these things about our people. And sometimes we think that because it works for us, we know that it will work for them. Or we think that we know them so well because we've studied their resumes. In that case, we get tunnel vision, and we can actually do a disservice to our people by thinking we know them the best. Now, Marcus Buckingham also says, the thing we're getting wrong is we haven't taken seriously the fact that each individual human gets energy from different, very specific activities. We are not experts of our people. They are experts of themselves. Now, by individualizing and asking them about themselves, we're also encouraging our people to become more self-aware. And that self-awareness allows people to feel seen and to feel like they can have more control and agency over their lives, including work. I'd like to share another quote by Marcus Buckingham. He says, we need to know where we can rely on you the most. We therefore need to be able to see you. We can't rely on what we can't see. In the best communities, you feel seen. You're seen as valuable because of what people see in you. I think this is such a powerful mindset. And it again reveals the fact that feeling seen leads to feeling valued. And the third way to put people first is to use feedback with care. And this is one of my favorite things to think about because I ran across this quote when I read the book Thanks for the Feedback by Douglas Stone and Sheila Heen. They said, receiving feedback sits at the intersection of these two needs, our drive to learn and our longing for acceptance. We often consider feedback in the context of telling someone how they could be better, what they should not do again, and what they should learn more about. We neglect the equally important facet of feedback that is the longing for acceptance. In other words, the longing for belonging. So the authors share 3 types of feedback we can give. First, appreciation feedback, used to see, to acknowledge, to thank, and to motivate our people. We can also give coaching feedback, which is used to help the receiver expand their knowledge or to sharpen their skills. And finally, we can give evaluation feedback, which is used to rank or rate against a set of standards. And it could be used also sometimes to align expectations or to inform decision-making. They also reveal that when people complain that they don't get enough feedback at work, they often mean that they wonder whether anyone notices or cares how hard they're working. They don't want advice, they want appreciation. When we give feedback, we don't pause to think which kind of feedback we are actually giving, and if it is the type the person is actually looking for or needs in the moment. When we ask for feedback, we are equally unaware and thus unspecific about what we are really hoping to get in that conversation. So the match actually matters. We can help our people communicate the kind of feedback they actually want and make a point to match that feedback appropriately. We can also be transparent and disclose the type of feedback we are giving and share our intention behind giving that feedback. Are we trying to show appreciation? Are we trying to give coaching? Or are we trying to give them an evaluation? And which one did they come looking for? Now, putting our people first is hard work. It may feel like so much extra effort when we already have so much responsibility to the bottom line, to serving the customers. However, putting our people first does not have to only benefit the people internally. It can also benefit the organization externally. In fact, being employee-centric can be a means to being more customer-centric. The happier, more valued, and fulfilled people are at making the product, the better the product and the better the business. In his book, The Heart of Business, Hubert Joly, who is the former CEO of Best Buy, encourages us to think about a company's 3 imperatives: people, business, and finance, and to think about it in that order. He advocates that excellence on the first, the development and fulfillment of the employees, leads to excellence in the next one, loyal customers who buy your products again and again and again. And then excellence in the next, making money. He says that making money is an outcome, but it is not the ultimate goal. And putting our people first will empower them to do better work so that the business and the finances can also flourish as a result. So how do we connect people to the business? Well, this brings me to my 3rd and final strategy, a focus on purpose. Now, I've spoken a lot to you today about helping our people feel valued and seen. Purpose helps our people feel fulfilled. Now, purpose also comes hand in hand with values. Our values are what gives us the agency to have a purpose. You can also think of it that way. For example, one of my values is integrity, and my purpose is to help people feel seen and valued for their full integrity. And this is because I myself have often been fighting for most of my life to be seen for my full integrity. So I recognize that as being important for other people. Now, circling back to Hubert Joly, he says that we will do well by doing good. Simply put, purposeful leadership recognizes that all companies are human organizations composed of individuals working together for a collective purpose. And the magic happens if you connect what drives individual employees to the purpose of the company in an authentic fashion. This makes me so curious about what would happen if we were to intentionally overlap and align the organization's purpose and values with those of the individuals. And I wonder how we could start. I think we can start by first uncovering what drives our people. And we can ask this in interviews and also regularly during someone's employment. We can ask questions like, what gets you out of bed in the morning? What problems do you find interesting? What are your values and how are they connected to why you're here? What is a change you seek to make? And how would you like to be remembered after you're gone? Then we can use this information. When we are hiring, we want to use it to help guide our methodology and decisions. When we're in the workplace, we can use it to inform how we can best curate their work profiles, how to motivate them, and how we can give feedback. Here are some examples using Zappos, the online retail company known for being driven by its purpose and values. Here are some examples of how they use their values to inform hiring. One of their values is to create fun and a little weirdness. So they actually ask in their interviews, how weird are you? Another value is to be humble. So they ask the shuttle bus driver afterward how they were treated by the interviewees. More on Zappos. Zappos also operationalize their values in the workplace. And here are two examples. Performance reviews are 50% based on core values. As CEO and co-founder Tony Hsieh describes it, whether you're living and inspiring the Zappos culture in others. And that's how they're evaluated. They also empower employees to celebrate the core values in their colleagues in their community. So once a month, each employee is given $50 to reward as a bonus to any fellow coworker that they deem worthy of having really leaned into the culture and the values of the organization. And they are given the trust and the freedom to make that decision. So we need to be clear about communicating our organizational purpose so that our people can make that connection for themselves. Todd Rose, who wrote the book Collective Illusions, wrote that when we compare ourselves against our group and find ourselves aligned, we get a reward response. This is an awesome benefit of connecting organizational purpose with individual purpose. And this is what Hubert Joly refers to as human magic. So finally, purpose will empower our people to feel belonging through finding meaning and fulfillment in their work and finding connection to something larger than themselves. I wonder how much of the challenges we face in our work is simply misalignment of purpose between our people and the organization. Without this alignment, employees become disengaged and unfulfilled, and it becomes hard to answer the question, why are you here? In fact, studies have revealed that disengaged employees are 12 times more likely to leave their jobs. So we can work to intentionally align purpose and values, then spotlight it. And this engages and empowers our people, helping them feel like they belong, like their work is fulfilling, and that they are directly adding value in the ways they do best. So finally, to wrap up, I'd like to share a final story with you. About a year ago, I was doing an online leadership program. And there were some coaches as part of the program. And I remember the first time that I was asked by a coach, and how do you feel about that? I was a little taken aback. I didn't really know how to respond. Why does it matter how I feel? I'm here to find answers and work on my skills, to be a better leader. Who cares about how I feel about it? And that, I remember that feeling so distinctly because I was so resistant to telling someone how I felt. And since then, I've become more convinced that our feelings lead us to the answers on how we can be better in so many ways. We just have to be aware of them and how it drives us and how we want it to drive us into the future. It's helpful to remember that all we want is to feel belonging. We want to be included. We want to be seen as people. So when we feel included, we feel safe. And it opens up the possibility for us to be ourselves, to speak up, to take risks, to have scary goals, to fail and try again, and to become more self-aware. When we feel safe, we also feel belonging. And when we feel belonging, we feel seen for who we are. When we feel seen, we feel more valued. And when we feel more valued, we feel more purposeful in our work. When we feel more purposeful in our work, we feel more fulfilled. And I'd like to ask yourself, how do you feel in your work? How do you feel in your non-work life? How do you feel in general? Do any of the words on the screen jump out at you? And we can do this with our people. We can ask them, how do they feel? And I think that in thinking about how we feel as people, we leaders actually have more in our toolbox to empower the people we lead to feel more valued and fulfilled, both at work and also in their lives. So ask yourself often, how do you feel? Thank you so much for your attention and hearing what I have to share. I know there was a lot of information, and I hope you have found at least one or two things to be intriguing and helpful for you on your journey as a leader. And I look forward to hearing your feedback, answering your questions, and connecting more with you in this time that is about to happen.
Thank you very much, Tiffany. You can stop the sharing so we can see you full screen as well. Thank you very much. That was an awesome and interesting information to share with us. You know, it's like I know there are a lot of things on the chat, but I want to read Tamer's comment earlier. I copied it because it's already covered by a lot of chats. You are reminding me of the movie Whiplash. I thought that was overblown, but it seems true. So
It is
yeah,
very true. It is so true.
So this is what I like with our webinars at PMI UAE chapter, and I believe it happens the same in the other chapters as well, because the talks are not industry specific. Sometimes I personally, as you are speaking, I personally feel that, oh, I'm blinded. I'm only focused on the corporate world in the industry where I am. And these things are also happening in the music industry and artistry, no? Okay, I have a few questions here in the Q&A from Tamer. In corporate, there is a documented and undocumented cases of discrimination based on gender, among other factors that affect promotion and how individuals fly above the radar. Does the artistic field have the same? Maybe I love to dream it. To dream, it doesn't, because people focus on creation of art. Yeah, discrimination in the music industry.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, because that unfortunately is everywhere, and it exists. It's prevalent in the music industry as well. And sometimes it's actually worse, because the music industry, like the media industry, is so focused on external image. And it is so easy for us to put people in boxes and to give them labels that are one-dimensional. And I think that a lot of artists struggle with that, myself included. I am a conductor of not just orchestra, but of opera. And I also like conducting smaller ensembles as well. But the message that I get from the industry is you have to be one, you have to fit in the box, so you can only conduct symphonies, you can only conduct operas if you want to make it. And artist managers often like to promote artists who have a niche in that way because it is easier to market them. And so I see a lot of the discrimination when it comes to people who use, or I should say that sometimes people make assumptions about artists and in a discriminatory way, and those assumptions can actually hold an artist back because it may not be the identity that they want to see for themselves, or it may not be their only identity, but that's what the industry wants to see, just that one little sliver.
Oh, great, great. Another one from Yasmina. As a conductor, as a musician player, do you also have leadership training? Because as project manager, we have to improve our leadership skills along with technical skills. So how it goes with you as a musician, as a conductor?
Yeah, that's a question that makes me think, because I don't think that musicians are trained in leadership skills at all, and not even a conductor. If I think back to my training, it's just all about the music, and we don't, very few people think about the leadership aspect until much later in their life. And it reminds me of the Peter principle, which is this idea that people rise to their level of incompetence. So what happens is usually so I'll back up a little bit. So the Peter principle says that when people get promoted, they get promoted because they're good at their job, and then eventually they will get promoted until they're not good at anymore, and that's where they stay. So they're incompetent at where they stay, and I see that a lot in the music industry, because people get promoted based on their artistic skills, but they might get promoted to a leadership position, and then they don't have the leadership skills, nor do they know to look for it, and then so they stay in that position where they may not be the best leader, and they're ineffective, and everybody kind of gets there, and then the organization kind of collapses because we lack the leadership. So there's this long-winded way to answer, no, we do not all study leadership skills, and I've been fortunate to have found that learning elsewhere in other industries.
Yes, and you're giving advices to CEOs, right? What you learned in the music industry, or applying to the CEOs outside the music industry. Let me jump to Irshad's inquiry or question. Hi, Tiffany. What's your recommendation regarding balance between empowering the employees and making accountable for their decisions? Yeah, because this is a very good question. It's like you're allowing them to make mistakes, but to what level of mistakes can you tolerate? Definitely mistakes have equivalent cost. So, yeah.
Yes, I love this question. And I think that we have to be clear upfront, and we have to be transparent. And sometimes as leaders, we're like, oh, well, we can only reveal 60% of the information, but not all the information. And then sometimes that we wait too long to reveal the important information that might give them more understanding of the severity of the situation, or give them more of an idea of the timeline of things. And I think that if we are clear and setting up boundaries up front, and to say that here's the work that needs to be done, and this is the boundary we need to get, it needs to be done, and it needs to be of this quality, then we can allow the room within that boundary for there to be creativity and maybe a little bit of missteps in that. But the goal is still that we will get the expectation is to get to that goal. And also, if we know that's the goal, we can set up ways to support them as they move forward. So we can
in their growth, yeah.
Yeah, goalposts and clear thinking ahead. It's almost like doing a pre-mortem where we're thinking about if all think about all the ways in which something can fail. What will we do? What can we do to prevent that? So putting measures in place to prevent or support systems in place to prevent things that go wrong to get worse, right?
Yeah. Like in project management, part of being a project manager is risk management. So it's like understanding what could probably go wrong when you give them this opportunity to make the mistakes. Yeah. So I'll go back to Yasmina. How does micromanagement translate in music? In technical fields, we have some micromanagement behavior sometimes.
Yeah, micromanagement in music often looks like not helping the musician, but you think that you're helping the musician. So as a conductor, if something goes wrong in a performance, let's say that somebody got lost and they don't know when to come in, or they're playing at the wrong time and we need to stop them. And often it's so we feel like, oh, it must make sense for us to just wave our hands frantically and like to get their attention. But sometimes what that does, it freaks them out. It freaks the people around them out. And then it actually is more harm than good. And I think that sometimes I see that so much in conductors or in artistic leaders where they feel like that they need to jump in to save the situation. And sometimes in their effort to frantically save the situation, they make it so much worse. So I see that a lot. And I also see in terms of micromanaging, doing the job for them. So sometimes we're just like, oh, well, they can't do it. So we're going to, I'm going to work harder to pull some of their weight. And in a conductor's case, that may be, oh, they're not feeling the rhythm hard enough, strong enough. So I'm going to show them the rhythm very strongly in my body, when the music may not be that heavy beaty. It might be a very fluid and serene piece of music. And yet we're there trying hard to get them to feel the beat and kind of getting in the way of what the music should sound like.
Yeah, I think this is actually what we were talking about. I asked you while we were on the backstage. It's like I asked that conductors hear every single mistake, every single out of tune. You are there, you can see this. You not see, hear as a conductor. And that is a very incredible, actually, talent and skills, no? For us as project managers, I think we also have to look into the nitty-gritty as much as possible. Little things, little mistake can create a big chaos in the end if they compile little by little. Another question from Sunando. Some of us are going through a situation where we are forced to let some of our employees go. So it's like right sizing, downsizing. What would be your recommendation in such a situation? So perhaps the organization is going through some crisis, or to save some money, the first impact is on the employees. So how do you handle, or what is your recommendation for the leaders in handling the employees being asked to leave?
Yeah, that is such a tough situation, and not a situation that I would hope for anybody to find themselves in. But if you do find yourselves in that situation, I think the best guideline is to just treat your people like they're people. And, this is a really hard reality. It's unfortunate that it's happening, that they have to be let go. And you can do only as much as you can to help, but you can't get their jobs back. But what you can do is you can give them empathy. You can say, I see you, I understand, I validate your feelings. It's often not helpful if we try to avoid having that conversation, because then we actually push the people away, and we seem as we seem disconnected and cold in that, and that could lead to a very unsettling departure for that person. And so it's seeing, having conversations with them just about what they're feeling, about how they might benefit from support from you outside of this job.
Yeah, I've been in a situation, and it really is not easy. It's not only about asking them that they are candidates. It's more difficult when you are part of the department who's being asked by HR, come on, Irene, choose the people. Oh, that's a really terrible experience. I have last two questions. Again, it's 12:10 a.m. in Tiffany's area, country in Taiwan. So I will not take more than 8:15. So last two questions, and then I'll close off. From Dilip, hi Tiffany. Sometimes micromanagement create confusion in hierarchy. How do you encounter and how to counter this? So micromanagement create confusion in hierarchy.
Let me just understand the question correct. So micromanagement leads to confusion as to who is in, like, to confusion
in the line of the organizational chart. So sometimes maybe stepping beyond their boundaries of reports because they're micromanaging beyond their direct reports.
I see. Yeah. I think that it's, I think that is one of the dangers of being a leader who maybe approaches the situations of wanting to help. I think that when we micromanage, we want to help. That's one thing. Another thing, it may be we want to micromanage because we want to control it. We want to control the situation. We want to ensure that we do it our way. So I think it's helpful to understand why is that micromanagement, why is that behavior happening, and does it have to do with the person who is doing it, or does it have to do with the situation? And does it have to do with, when there's a confusion in the hierarchy, there's usually some, there may be some status shifting and status role complications in that. So understanding what is the result of the micromanaging. Does it lead to a more favorable status change for that person, or does it benefit the people that that is where the power is being taken away? So that's a long way of saying that it's complicated, and I don't have like the answer for it, but I think that if we think along the lines of status and how that status is shifting, and how we might understand the intentions behind the micromanaging.
Yeah, so, and also another thing is that HR are very HR should be approachable in case there are employees who are experiencing such. Therefore, the HR would find the best solution in handling such management style. Okay, I have one more question from Yasmina, but if it's okay, Yasmina, I can skip this question. It's about how often do you read books, or how many do you listen in a year, and you read books about musicians or music? So I promise you, Tiffany, I will not go beyond 8:15. So I will skip this question.
I'm perfectly happy to go a little bit over if
okay,
there are
please.
questions.
Just a last question from Yasmina, please. Okay, it's the last one, I promise. Yeah. How many books do you read?
The question about books. So yeah, I try to read every day, and I don't think I have like a specific number goal of like how many books do I want to read this year, but I do. So far this year, I think I'm on like 19, my 19th book, and I listen to audiobooks because I feel like I can multitask when I do it. So I listen while I'm walking in the morning, or I listen when I'm on the train, and I listen. And I one of the downsides of that is I can't really take notes as much as I want to, but I do try to listen to a lot of I try to read a lot of leadership books and a lot of organizational psychology. I love the book in which I quoted in this presentation I'm currently reading, called Collective Illusions by Todd Rose. I'm halfway through the book, not fully through it yet, but I threw in the quote because it was very relevant to what we're talking about. And I read books also on mindset and how to design goals, and leadership and business and music. I do also read a lot of, I actually, it's funny, I read a lot of music books in my training years. So I feel like I over-indexed on the music books, and now I'm kind of like reading all the other books that are out there because I've never read them, when I was in my school days, because I was so focused on the music that I really didn't expand. And I really feel like, I guess my point is that I'm really feeling like that I benefit so much from the other industries that I'm glad that that's sort of where I'm playing now, in those sandboxes, not really in my own sandbox.
Yeah, great. Okay, thank you very much again, Tiffany. I know you will share your presentation to us, which we will share as well to our attendees and members. So before we end this session, we would like to invite our colleagues to our PMI membership for another webinar on Thursday, September 1. And the topic will be the importance of good program management in cybersecurity. Please register at the events page of PMI UAE website. Shout out to our friend Amil Ali, who makes all registration link possible, and also to Sultan for applying your PDUs. Also, we invite you once again to please look at the available volunteering opportunities. We at the events team are also looking for volunteers. Please join us. Otherwise, you will have to bear with me every time we have a webinar. As we close this webinar tonight, I would like to thank you all for your attendance and participation. We won't say goodnight without saying thank you to the PMI UAE Chapter volunteers, always behind the successful webinars, our colleagues from the membership, marketing, outreach, volunteering, finance, and governance. Until our next webinar, together with my colleague Olumide behind the camera and our director Rosanna, this is Irene Corpus wishing you all a pleasant evening. Thank you once again, Tiffany. Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, Irene.
Thank you.